Thank you everyone for joining our monthly seminar series hosted by USACM. So today we have two amazing speakers, Dixia from School of Engineering at the Westlake University and Prof. George Karniadakis from Brown University. So the first speaker will be Dixia from Westlake on the Asia side, and he will be speaking for about 25 minutes. And then Prof. George Karniadakis will follow up immediately after that, and then we will have a Q&A session at the end of the two talks. In fact, we will allow a few questions, brief questions after the first talk as well, if there is any burning question that you want to ask. So first speaker, Dr. Dixia from Westlake University. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So many big names and and also I see Professor Karniadakis, it's truly humble to have have the conversation with everybody and also share some of the work in the last 3 years. So I started with just slides. So I know today is more about mathematics and applied math, all those things. But I do want to show after training with Michael Trentfield and Professor Karniadakis, I come back to China. I started doing a lot of hands-on work and some of the reinforcement learning that I learned with Professor Michael Trentfield and Karniadakis, and how it's transferred some of the work that I have been doing. So before 2022, this is a joint work with Professor George Karniadakis and Michael Trentfield. Is everything is about the blood body. So afterwards, I come back to China. I was say, okay, so I want to play some big toy. So which is underwater robots. So let me start with the first image of what the first robot I built, and this is I mentioned our big kids playing big toys, and the second robot I built is this second one is just test in 2025 last year, and both of the robots go to 2,000 meter. So there's a lot of design and as well as control inside there. So let me get deep into there very quickly. So before I want to going deep, I do want to say there's a lot hype in terms of deep ocean exploration, and the one you see here is a traditional underwater vehicle, which is an engineer masterpiece, but it's already little bit outdated because it's low efficiency, agility, and really difficult to control the flow. So whether this is the future underwater vehicle, I don't think so. So I think if we can build ocean vehicle just this dolphin, it would be amazing. But nevertheless, I think just to quick a demonstration, I think where a next generation underwater vehicle of especially bio-inspired underwater vehicle can go is that I think it's going to be more agile and more stable, that I actually can navigate in a complex flow, and also more smart or more accurate as well as more quiet. But to begin with, this demonstration, for example, the traditional underwater, this is also one robot my student built. As you can see, when trying to go inside, it's the motion is not smooth. But on the other hand, the rubber turtle, you can see when it's do the backflipping in the water and using the LMS force, it can control the body really in just an aerobatic or hydrobatic motion. Second of all, the traditional underwater vehicle or the ships, they are really difficult to turn. And on the other hand, you see, the robot that we built, population software robotics, can turn in only 0.2 body lengths and really quickly as well as sensor the flow. Second, third of voice, the traditional a robot, it's really difficult to hold its position in this turbulent flow and cannot resist, cannot feel. But on the other hand, fish actually just a turbulent flow. We call it a real Texas flow, real Texas motion, where I will show later in the reinforcement learning this fish can actually navigate in this complex flow. Last but not least is more quiet. So the traditional underwater vehicle, they will raise a lot of dust. So, and while it's they scale off of fish. So they are not well controlled the flow around it. But on the other hand, if you see this one of the robots we built, that these 5, 6 fish actually hide underneath this robot actually like didn't get scared. While there's a fish we donate certain fish donate to aquarium. So so in the way that that's they actually don't interact with the environment too much. So that's where I think the future robot go. But then nevertheless, before going inside so many as well as this Sigurd second, before going inside so many details about the design and the a manufacturer part, I think I want to focus slightly here on the reinforcement as also about the fish. So to begin with, let's do a comparison between the fish and ships. By the way, this figure is drawn by Zhong Qiang, who is also assistant professor right now in Iowa State, which is a good representation of we need to understand the nature, we need to design the new apparatus, as well as very importantly, we need to smart sensing, modeling, and also control the complex unsteady flow. To begin with, you can see, I want to do a comparison, here in the audience, really getting into detail, with the flow and what's the difference between ships or man-made structures, as well as and well as with a ship fish. So 1936, we see, in by a very famous scientist James Gary, and he revealed that fish that actually can actually propel itself with a much larger energy than he calculates compared to the drag experienced. So what really happens is that compared to a flow of around the body of the rigid body, you see this vortex shading that's a large drag source. On the other hand, here is done by George Lauder and Professor Michael Chinifilo, that a dead fish can swim upstream. It's a vivid demonstration that this fish can go inside these a vortex strait and use these vortex. And by the way, this is a dead fish, so the muscle cannot provide any energy. All the energy swimming forward is actually by the external energy. So what is really going on here? I want to demonstrate what these vortex. These vortex basically you can see that this vortex is suction force. So if you place your body right from the top row, that your tail and head will taking advantage of this vortex. On the other hand, if you're not able to move your body in a correct way, you are not able to taking advantage of this vortex actually to become a drag. So in short, ship is actually trying to avoid these vortex, suppress these vortex. On the other hand, fish actually enhance these vortex and taking advantage of these vortex. So that's comes the main part of the last couple of years on the numerical and the methodological part was using deep reinforcement learning. To begin with, let me show one of the work that back in MIT as well as coming back to China is that I want to build vehicle can both fly and swim. Compared to a traditional this amphibious robot with using propeller, so a puffin, a very cute animal, they can actually swim and fly by changing the motion of the wing. And one of the secret is this is the work back in MIT was done by my senior Jacob, as well as later done by my student Wang Zhipeng. So one of the things is they change the trajectory of the motion of the wing that you can see in the air, they have a mild downstroke and a quick upstroke, induce a very strong leading edge vortex, creating this strong lift force, unsteady lift force. On the other hand, in the water, they change trajectory reversely in a quick downstroke and a mild upstroke, creating these a pair of vortex jet, induce a very strong unsteady thrust. It seems the problem solved. However, I would just want to show you these two comparisons that the center, the trajectory of this is exactly the same, the top row and the bottom row, but you see the instantaneous force shown by a red arrow is different. And if you pay attention to that and the motion of the wing here, slightly change angle of attack and create a huge difference underwards. So this is I want to say the reason why is like the vortex is strong nonlinear, time variant, and large parametric space like problem. So in the way, it's really difficult to control. So back in 2020, I worked with Professor Karniadakis and being open to this wonderful deep reinforcement learning technology, and this ends up with in the peanuts in 2020. So we say, oh, can we apply that to the wing? And we say, yeah, and we basically apply first naively, at just the old the control of the cylinder that naively to flapping wing can both heave and pitching, and the result is very bad. Not even reach the brute force compared to the reward. But then we actually say, let's change to transformer. So in the way, it's have a memory, have like a coherence, like a space, a time pro coherence, as well as trying to first showcase some expert this. And the result is quite amazing in the way that it's learning very stable, quickly, as well as above the traditional result. So just to showcase what is really going on, that you can see from this oscillatory motion, as well as oscillatory, but to this very weird, complicated a trajectory. Oh, this is already published in GFM in 2024. Just for comparison, what's going on, that we actually, for this non-uniform flapping, we compare statistically same mean of amplitude compared to sinusoidal motion. That we see that statistically they are the same for both amplitude and frequency, but you see carefully the wake that seems the leading edge vortex spiral back to the back and become quickly catch that by the wing and to enhance by the pressure. So what's it look like? I'm a Chinese, so I was want to using Taiji is as example, is that it seems they're not trying to just using the force wildly, but trying to find the right time, right spot, and the right time to to move. So this actually going forward just a demonstration, but later we keep going forward to say in the experimental wise, we actually say, can we actually not only just flapping wing, but also just a turtles or sorry, just ducks web and the fish. So we ends up in this a robotic a tank that can doing over 120,000 experiment a week. And so I would just because of time limitation, I want to just show some very good result that it's actually learn the force compared to the brute force. Brute force is in this area. That is only 0.4 Newton, a thrust force, and 0.6 Newton in a lift force. The reinforcement link go 2 or 3 times larger. And then we didn't stop here. We actually transferred to small robot do indeed swim better, as well as we actually build just using this motion of lag motion and build actual robot to swim in in the North Pole that just come back in last 1 month. So this is something to begin with how to flap. And I want to also demonstrate reinforcement learning onto how to swim. That the traditional fish can swim in this a very beautiful way, can called a real Texas swim in this complete flow, as well as swim changing direction or group swimming. So here we actually doing the same thing this time, we also using DRQN, and we put it agent to work. So in the way that you can see that the fish can actually guide itself, and we tell it to swim to the to the target with 0 speed, then it's gliding towards the direction. And if we put very negative reward, say to avoid this area, they actually able to avoid and guide gliding, and then to do the rotation to this. Why we say keep a distance towards the target? So it's actually swim to keep a distance, and when the target, the virtual target speed up, the motion starts changing pattern quickly catch up with this. Likewise, we also trying to say do a collective swimming. So this is all done by my postdoc Zhu Yi. So say we can do a collective swimming in terms side by side and tandem or stacked. But before we actually to do a large swimming of the fish group, so you need to see that the fish, if you there's a lot high dynamic interference between two fish. So for example, the head is have a high pressure, low is a low pressure. So if you don't swim okay, so you actually being pushed away from the this bottom fish and this top fish being suctioned to there. So we apply a multi-agent reinforcement, have two fish to keep certain distance. So you can see that both fish starting from a different configuration can collectively swim in this format. Especially if you see the bottom right, you see that the fish on the top trying to catch up and then recover to a certain distance very nicely. And this is, of course, we're keep progressing in the way the front fish to swim randomly, the back fish swim trying to follow up. And this is also being applied to actual robotic fish that we build. So they actually can accommodate to complex vortex street, as well as to rotate body in a very small way. As you can see, just to pay attention to my mouse here, that the swim rotation diameter shrink from 0.72 to 0.47 really quickly. So just to quickly go to the next demonstration very quickly of a deep reinforcement learning is that there's a challenge is before you see is always in the uniform flow or always in the this still water. So the real life have a very complex incoming flow due to obstacle, due to gust, all the things. But on the other hand, nature actually evolving this very nice way, can hovering, can also navigating in this a real Texas motion this complex flow. So we here actually at the beginning we are trying to demonstrating say whether structure can move through this complex flow, taking advantage of this complex flow. At the beginning, it's really difficult and actually fail all the time if we're just using the before end to end. Now we actually started developing something called hierarchy. So basically, one is actually a reinforcement learning, a planner of the trajectory motion, and another one is a learning by itself for the dynamics. So the result actually showed very well in the way that this hierarchy a reinforcement learning that we developed or taking advantage and developed recently submit to Nature Communication that actually can cover compared to end to end just to from beginning to training that it's cannot stay at its own position, while it's also can follow this trajectory, while end to end reinforcement is 0% of success. Last but not least is also can try to learn the the navigation of this obstacles to avoid obstacles 100% all the time. So just to demonstration, what is really going on from the top row of the HRL and the bottom row, if you separate the dynamics, just like your cerebral and your brain to do brain to decide what to do and cerebral to do very quickly motion dynamics, that the higher planner able to find a policy in a very concise way, as well as the lower part, you see that this is the difference between the control force and the flow induced force. The higher level of reinforcement in the low dynamics able to do that very accurately, while end to end is predict very bad. Last but not least is we apply this to keep apply this to to real flow instead of just a small dot of this, that you can see if you don't training at beginning for end to end to if and the fish is not able to swim to the target or struggling there. But if you apply to that reinforcement learning hierarchy, so the fish able to learn to do a detour and swim all the way to to the this target. What is really going on is that if you to the local flow, that the fish able to find the pathway between the vortex pair, which is the high speed region, to actually navigating to there. So hopefully, like, in this short amount of time, I demonstrate, like, the deep reinforcement learning about like this bio-inspired flow for, like, the bio-inspired, like, robotics. Just to like give me, like, 3 to 2 minutes, like, to summarize, to like showcase where the, like, the big problem have been. So, like, as mentioned, like, this robot I built while in the lab, this, you see the toy problem is in the lab, like, have like very interesting performance that, like, if you go to ocean, it's more complicated. So here we actually build, like, the first, like, bio-inspired robotics to reach 2,000 meters. So this is, like, when, like, actually we do the sea trial and actually reach, like, the 2,000 meter, like, water depths. And this is where, like, first reach the depths. And like, why is right now in NUS working with Yang Liu, like also a former student with Professor George Karniadakis. And this is, like, so like learning from the mentoring. And this is like where do the test. And this is me, like, doing like a test in the, like, sea. And that's where, like, a common swim automatically by itself to like this. And later is also, like, we say, oh, can we actually, like, do a more better navigation in the deep water? So which, like, don't raise a lot of dust. So this is where we actually do a test. And like, have, like, even in the mouth have a small fish in the big mouth, and small fish will swim out. Just to showcase very quickly, like, this big fish, like, demonstration, like, it's all done by me and a student with 5 students. And you can see this, like, a big robot of over 1,000 kilograms. It actually doesn't cause a lot of, like, flow. And then we also test, like, our, like, a nuclear powered, like, a battery that, like, actually, like, at a 1,000 meter light up, like, pentagon. As well as we take, like, a robotic arm actually on the like, this, and stick a flag at a 2,000 meter, as well as, like, this fish, like, a swimming. So very nicely, like, this small fish actually, like, a swim, like, in the 1,300 meter, we actually find, like, a cold spring that actually have some live and live animal there, just to showcase, like, the last, like, the video that we take, that this is 2,000 meter. As you can see, the traditional underwater vehicle already going to cause a lot of dust. Here, actually quite stable. Actually, like, stabilize, like, even focus, like, on like a small fish. By the way, this is all autonomous. Like, we already don't have, like, control it. So in the last 3 years and 4 years, I did, like, a couple of things, like, to reach, to maneuver, and as well as, like, in the future, we say, can we actually build, like, robotic arm, just like a collaboration with Yuan and the Professor Cecilia, is to, like, catch these, like, like, things in a very, like, dynamic way. So, like, other things, so to speak. Just to summarize, like, I think, like, the recent, like, development of, like, humanoid robotics have shown, like, this, like, amazing performance. Like, I'm gonna be quick, like, just like a literally 1 minute. So, like, and it's day back, like, like, we see that, like, in 1990s, like, where, like, Professor Mark Riebert started, like, build this, like, a very interesting robotics. But at the beginning of, like, like, these robot is, we first need to know, or he always ask a question, what's the difference between walking and running, to understanding the dynamics. And once you have this dynamics, you can put the physics into, like, the control, and it become, like, instead, like, override the traditional control is a classic control, and you can actually taking advantage of dynamics. And then, like, you see these, like, compared to, like, this working very awkwardly in 2013, 2015 DARPA challenge, you have, like, this humanoid robot, like, it can do backflipping. Same way, like, I think, like, in 2 months, I come back to China. This is my first robot that I try to, like, answer the question, like, why moving left and right can swim forward. And then, like, 8 months later, you start to have a fish have, like, a spine cord. So they can provide huge force and a swim, like, really, but it seems like a fish just have a stroke, don't know how to use the body. But then after you put like the simple, even just like simplified hydrodynamic model into the brain and using reinforcement learning, as you can see last, it's kind of like doing a rotation very quickly and swim more naturally. This is my last slides. So hopefully, like in the future, like maybe I can build like using like a physical informed machine learning, using like all kinds of like amazing like AI technology, combining with a design tool to build like a next generation underwater vehicle that is like look like fish or even like swim better than a fish. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dixia. Very nice and a kind of visionary talk. So I really enjoyed it. I also used that DARPA 2015 slide on the robotics course I'm doing to show how they were failing back then. So quite remarkable progress. Yeah. So any quick question? So if not, we can keep the questions for the end for both talks as planned. And we now have Professor Karniadakis from Brown University. So, well, I think we all know Prof. Karniadakis has been pioneering quite a few fields in applied math. The one I've been working on is spectral element methods. Of course, that was pioneering work on methods to solve PDEs, and he has been then working on physics-informed neural networks. In fact, he introduced physics-informed neural networks that were introduced by Dixia in the previous talks, among many other topics. And he's also a member of the National Academy of Engineering in the US. So without further ado, Prof. Karniadakis, anytime. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I enjoy listening to Disha, who actually introduced automation experiments, and I'll get back to that. But I want to talk about this is a year of agents, as you all know, and I want to talk about how agents can automate and go beyond automation in scientific machine learning. The framework, our framework is called Athena, the goddess of wisdom and reasoning. And I will explain all these avatars, which basically represent different characters of my lab. You can see me down here on the bottom, together with my colleague, Professor Maxi, who have become avatars now. But before I get there, I want to connect to the previous talk to Disha in passing mentioned this robotic intelligent towing tank. I just want to show you that automation didn't start in Google, or it didn't start in Agentic in Andrew Ng's class. This was a paper we wrote. Disha won the best PhD thesis at MIT. He was experimentalist, and I was still working there at the MIT Sea Grant. I wrote this introduction. If you read the introduction, 2019, it sounds poetic, could be a ChatGPT, but actually I wrote it back there in just to, I think the contribution in this paper it was these two paragraphs that I wrote about how I perceived this new lab, where Disha was never in the lab, but we kept getting experiments. In fact, he was able to demonstrate 100,000 experiments in the first year of this intelligent towing tank, which was using GP, Gaussian process regression, for an uncertainty quantification in order to motivate the next experiment. So it was sort of Bayesian design, experimental design. But it shows you that a PhD student in the lab, for example, will do about maybe 100 experiments a year, 500 experiments, and this we could automate to 100,000 experiments in just 1 year. So anyway, this is back 2019 when we published the paper. I want to talk about scientific machine learning, and of course the two pillars of scientific machine learning are pins. I'm not going to talk about pins, just to give you a little update. Pins 2.0, for example, and that is based on a very simple modification, namely we have improved tremendously on the optimizers. We now work with second-order optimizers. And so here you can see in this plot, you can see a result for the Burgess equation, the green line, versus the result of using a second-order optimizer, this orange line. So we gain several orders of magnitude accuracy using the curvature in optimizer. Basically, curvature-aware optimizers with hyperparameters. This is not just the Berger's equation. As you can see, here we go against SOAP. SOAP is, of course, the nominally second-order optimizer of Google. But as you can see, with our methods, we beat SOAP by orders of magnitude in many different settings. And this is highlighted in Optimizing the Optimizer. And we have a new paper that will come out that sort of changes not just the pins, but everything that you know in deep learning, because second-order optimizers will be the future, is the future and will be the future. So DeepMind, for example, use this high-precision approach of pins to demonstrate that there are singularities in Navier-Stokes, and that's one of the 1 million questions in mathematics from the Clay Institute. So pins are used everywhere. There's no single field that pins are not used. So obviously, we would like to automate all this process. So a year ago, we wanted to compare the state of the art at the time, and DeepSeek was just out, and we wanted to say, can DeepSeek or one of Claude or ChatGPT replace one of my graduate students? So we did this systematic study, both for scientific machine learning tasks, but also scientific computing tasks. One of them was to solve, using pins, a 2D Poisson equation in an L-shaped domain where there's a singularity. So you can see here the results in summary. Some results look good, sort of in the naked eye norm. For example, here you can see a ChatGPT O micro, which was developed to compete with DeepSeek R1, was good. The Claude 3.7 was good. The subsequent smarter Claude 3.7 was not good, which is down here. And DeepSeek was totally wrong. And these results are demonstrated here in the next slide, where you can see, we're talking about state of the art a year ago, that these different LLMs will choose the number of training, will choose the network, will choose the activation functions, but the results vary, very consistent results. You have DeepSeek R1, which was supposed to be, at that time, the amazing LLM, was giving error of 55% as opposed to Claude 4.2 and then ChatGPT O3 micro, or of the order of 5%. The improved version of Claude 3.7 gave over 300% error. So a year ago, it was very difficult to trust these LLMs, but of course, there was progress. There is this progress since then, and I will talk about that. On the other hand, I want to also talk about DeepONet. This is the first neural operator, which we proposed in my lab in 2019. Since then, there has been a zoo of neural operators for different tasks. DeepONet is the only one that actually resembles a human neuron, because we have the branches, we have the trunks, we have the synaptic outputs. And of course, you can plug and play. For example, you can use spiky neural networks, which is my new focus on running fast and running with very low energy. Okay, so that's kind of the DeepONet. And DeepONet also can be used as a foundation model, because you can solve in one geometry. And of course, changing the geometry is a fundamental problem in transfer learning, or learning, for example, the system in one, identify the system in one state, let's say the limit cycle, like this last one, and trying to go through a bifurcation into a stationary point. These are all very difficult, but this can be done using DeepONet and with extra terms in penalizing the conditional shift between the target and the source. So we have demonstrated all that, and it's well known. But we wanted again to go back and ask the LLMs of the time to solve the simplest of the problems we had in the original paper, Nature Machine Intelligence, and that is, can you find the antiderivative operator? In other words, can you solve this ODE, or can you just find this operator G that, given you give it an integrand, it can give you the indefinite integral very accurately. Okay, so one of the things that we had to do when we were doing it manually is to find a right function space. So now some reasoning was required, because the LLMs have to actually construct function spaces. So if you go through the list, you can see here the prompt is implement a deep operator network in TensorFlow to learn the antiderivative operator. We don't give any other instructions. So DeepSeek R1 construct a space which we will use polynomials, trigonometric functions, and a mixture of exponentials and so on. Then other LLMs would use similar or different spaces and so on. I don't want to elaborate too much, but just let's go directly to the result. You can see for different correlation lengths of these integrands, which shows the complexity of the function. In this case, DeepSeek R1 is the winner, especially for large length scales, but even for very small length scales, it gives a pretty good accuracy compared to what we had before with, remember, Claude 3.7, that was the winner before in the elliptic equation. Now it gives an error of almost 200%. Again, what we see a year ago, a huge consistency, not just hallucinations, but a huge consistency, very little reasoning, and so on. So that brings us to multi-agents and why we need to use multi-agents. We need to use multi-agents, first of all, for robustness, but most importantly, to develop some creativity, reasoning, and therefore creativity for solutions with superhuman performance. And that's what I want to demonstrate next. So this, and we have two different implementations of this. I will go into depth in one of them, and then I will give you just some hints about the second one. So this first agentic scientific machine learning, it's only scientific machine learning. Next, I will talk also about scientific computing. But this framework has 3 steps. In the first step, we have the human who will provide the prompt and may or may not provide metrics and training data. In the step 2, we have 2 agents, a multimodal agent who can first analyze the data, say, how do the data look? Do I have noise? Do I have discontinuities? What should I do? And then it passes, then it communicates with the evaluator, because the evaluator is the one that says, what kind of metrics and norms should I use? Should I use L1 metric errors? Should I use Barrow norms? Because I'm interested in spectral bias, and therefore I need to emphasize high frequency errors, and so on. So that comes here. There is a human who can approve this evaluation criteria before we go to the next step, step 3, which is really where the solution is evolved. So I will take you through this. Let's go from the top to the bottom. So from the top, we start with some root solution. Now, the root solution is, it could be a guess. It could be asking a single LLM to give you an answer to your problem, or it could be some sort of crude approximation. But we assume that you have a root solution, which will then evolve. Now, for those of you who are in this field, you may have heard of AlphaEvolve from DeepMind. AlphaEvolve does something similar. It starts with a solution, and then it evolves it using genetic algorithms. So this idea is quite similar. If we start from the top, I hope you can see my cursor, where you see here that we have a solution. Then it is evaluated by the multimodal analyst, the same one that can see, can check XY plots and so on. And then basically we go into this loop. Oh, here on the left, I have the knowledge base. I have like a librarian where I built a knowledge graph. So papers, previous knowledge, everything. We built a knowledge graph, and that's where all this information comes in. And the knowledge retriever will take that knowledge and distribute it to the various avatars, agents downstream as needed. So but the main thrust of this project, the main brain, so to speak, is this red box here. We have the proposer and the critic. The proposer is very creative. It's designed to be very creative, to go beyond what you see in the papers. The critic, on the other hand, is the skeptic. Is a little skeptic. You will see how that you can achieve by controlling the temperature of the LLM. But the critic is skeptic, and so there will be several iterations, as is shown here, before that solution then passes the certain criteria, in which case it will go to an engineer and a debugger. They will run the code, they will debug the code, they will run the code, and then they will obtain solutions. These solutions now will keep one solution, the best solution, but also our strategy is to evolve other solutions which may not have the smallest error, but we can see, for example, from the slope of the history laws that they are promising. So we keep more than one solution, and we'll use a voting system to evolve the solution. So this is what is shown here. As I said, it's a genetic algorithms. All these solutions will be selected, and then they evolve in parallel. So for example, here you see parent solution. There is the best solution. Also, you can see here Gemini, Grok, GPT-5, and so on. These are all different diverse LLMs to give robustness to the system, but also they vote differently and they think differently. And I want to pick the largest number of votes so then I can proceed to the next generation and the next generation in this evolution solution tree. So overall, the voting agents are instructed to balance exploitation, where you select good solutions, but also exploration, where you select some underperforming solutions, however, which may have potential downstream. Okay, so that's in a nutshell what we're doing. You can read the paper about the details, but I want to highlight a few applications which show that indeed these agents can go beyond human performance and they can provide actually surprises and superhuman performance. So let's start with the discontinuous function approximation. So the prompt here is build any model of your choice for data generation using the provided data set. So we use the function on the right just to generate data. None of the agents do not know that, so that we don't have any leak of this information. And the evaluation is the model should be scored based on the mean square error, based on a validation set that we provide, the user provide. Okay, so we provide so the schematic is as follows. First of all, we obtain a very rough solution we call the root solution. On the right, you can see what is the root solution. The blue is the exact function. As you can see, has high frequency because we are interested in spectral bias. It has discontinuities and also has spikes. So it has all sorts of elements that you don't really know a priori how to use a neural network to fit this network. So, but we start with a solution which is pretty rough. This orange dot line is really obtained by a simple neural network, only 5 layers and only 100 epochs. We have not converged, and you can see it's very rough solution. So we want to evolve this solution. Now, there are several rounds of iterations, but I want to highlight some of the, when we get to the champion solution at the very end, eventually what the system has chosen is a multi-agent system which consists of a mix of experts where they propose a gating function, sigma, which is the activation function, times k, which is an adaptive activation function, x minus x naught, where x naught is something that they want to try to detect to see if there's any discontinuity. In fact, they find that x naught is 0.04 where the discontinuity is. So they locate first the discontinuity. Then they propose a network which has 2 parts, as you can see here, this gating function on the left, and then E2 of x is another gating function to the right. So they want to treat the 2 neural networks differently. Interestingly, the adaptive parameter k, it was inspired by one of our papers on adaptive activation function back in 2020, and one of the proposer said, I better use k to be adaptive because I know how to do it. Another innovation was that they used an additional loss term, which, as you can see here, involves the G, the gating function that was proposed. So it is very different than what I would do or what a current student would do. Here I show schematically what happens. There's like 5 or 6 rounds of solutions before you get to a very accurate solution. And here on the left, I show what all these different neural networks that were involved. The data analyst was a Gemini, the evaluator was a Claude, the retriever, the proposer. And at the very end here on the right, I show also the temperature. The temperature is controlling the creativity of the LLM. For example, as I said earlier, the proposer, we want the proposer to be very creative, so we increase its temperature. It becomes a little wild at 0.9. On the other hand, the root engineer has 0 temperature, is very deterministic. The critic, which works together with a proposer, has a lower temperature at 0.5. Similarly, if I go back to the Poisson equation that I showed you earlier, remember the single LLM had problems in difficulty in doing that. Now, after a few iterations, they get a pretty good shape. And how do they do it? Well, they first decompose the solution into 2 parts. One is the inhomogeneous solution, another the homogeneous solution that satisfies the Laplace equation, and therefore they can choose analytically the particular solution, and then they try to compute the homogeneous solution. So the homogeneous solution using a neural network. So that's one innovation. And then they also are very careful on how they distribute the points. You can see 70% of the points are distributed uniformly, but then they go around the origin where there is a singularity, the elliptic singularity, because the stress goes out to the 2/3, and therefore the derivative of the stress blows up, and they choose appropriately. There are also other tricks that they do, but you can see there's some ingenuity, some sense, and the results are now very accurately, very robust, and very accurate. And the third one I will give you is the antiderivative operator. Remember, we're struggling with the various ones with the single LLMs. Now, if you evolve the solution with the method that I show you, you get very accurate results. And where's the innovation here? Well, innovation number one says, which actually we didn't do it in our original paper. We said, look, this operator that you're looking at is linear. So I don't need to use in the branch of the DeepONet, I don't need to use nonlinear activation functions. So this way I will guarantee that the operator that I will discover is actually linear and has this property. So that's innovation number one. Then they know that at small correlation lengths, the errors are always larger. So what they do is they train the network across different correlation lengths. But as you can see here, they actually weigh more with this distribution. They have more samples for smaller correlation lengths because they want uniform accuracy in the output. And another innovation. So you can see here the accuracy is very good across different correlation lengths. The accuracy is 0.003% as opposed to 5% that we had before. I don't have time to talk about the other methods, but for example, for a Berger's equation, they find a self-adaptive pin. For diffusion reaction system, they use FNO. For vorticity reconstruction from sparse measurements, they use a UNet. So they use a diversity of tools, always with somewhat ahead of humans. If you look at the improvements that happen, for example, solving the Berger's equation, they had, and compared to the root solution, they have an improvement of over 10,000, and the function approximation 200, and so on. Overall, there was huge gains going to multi-agents. We also wanted to see how much they participate. Are they lazy bumps? It turns out that the proposer does most of the work, as you can see here, the orange. And then the second one is the critic, and then the result analyst. The data analyst has very small contribution. The human has 0.3% participation. Do they always agree? It turns out that they agree for the top two solutions, but they fight. They fight a lot for the third solution, because we evolved three solutions. So as you go down the solution, there's disagreement, and then that's why we use the voting system. And I have a couple of more minutes to tell you about the more broader framework that we built now, we call Athena. Athena stands for Agentic Team for Hierarchical Evolution Numerical Algorithms. This is more general in the sense that not only we look at scientific machine learning, we also look at scientific computing. We're looking at operators and so on. So let's go from this panel, explain these panels from top to bottom. We have a user here. This is Juan Toscano. Looks like that, like him. And then he goes through a triage. If you've ever been to a hospital, you go through a triage. They take your vitals, signals first. And then depending on what the diagnosis is, they send you to a scientific computing or scientific machine learning or operators. So it's different manifestations of this. Then you go to the strategy team. This is very similar to what I had before, the proposer and the critic. And there's lots of disagreement. It's really hilarious to read how they disagree and how finally they come to a consensus. So panel B is very important. Then you go to a planner. You can see a planner. The planner here has access to a knowledge graph again, where we have lots of papers from the literature. They can read experimental data to compare against and so on. And then here now we go to the debugging team. Finally, we go to the advisors. You can see me here and my colleague, Professor Maxi. And that then we look at this. But these are avatars. There's no real advisor. we managed to eliminate ourselves also from this process. So now, depending on the result, we go back to the analyst or we give the final report. Now, Athena is based on a relatively different concept. In fact, we don't use at all the AlphaEvolve. We don't use genetic algorithms. Instead, we use online learning with a contextual bandit where we have a certain policy that we try to impose. Another innovation that we use here, we use the method of scaffolding. Scaffolding means that we define all this in a library with snippets of codes from all sorts of different types of applications, from CFD, from solid mechanics, from scientific computing in general, discontinuous Galerki methods, spectral element methods, but also pins, neural operators, FNOs, and so on. So we give small codes that they can have in their disposal, but of course, as you can see at the end, they change the codes totally. So I'm going to give you two examples. The first one is, I was very surprised with that. We asked it to solve the implicit Berger's equation. Okay. Now I've been solving this problem for many, many years. I use lots of points and Galerkin methods. Let's say Fourier Galerkin, where I know where the shock is. So it's a 2D with periodic boundary conditions. Well, the agent Athena didn't try to do what I did. Instead, it decided to solve this exactly. And I said, there's no way, because there's no exact solution of 2D Berger's equation implicit. I know that for a fact. And you know that there's no transformation like that. If there's a viscous Berger's in 1D, yes. So what the agents did, they transformed. They realized they have periodic boundary conditions. They made the transformation first along the propagation direction. So they converted the problem to a 2 to 1D problem. After that, they used the method of characteristics up to the shock, up to the point where the characteristics intersect, and then they find an exact solution up to that point, and then they went on from that point on, and they found an exact solution. So for first time ever, I didn't know it. Maybe you guys know that there was that you could do that, but for 2D, but the agent did it and surprised us. And my last example is actually a combination of scientific computing and scientific machine learning. We go with the textbook, classical CFD textbook. You have the cavity flow, the lead-driven cavity, but we solve the inverse problem. We have some sporadic measurements where the points are, and we don't know anything else. We don't know the Reynolds number. We don't know anything. The fluid, we don't know anything. So, of course, the agent goes and uses pins, because pins are very good for inverse problems, especially you don't know much, but you have some data. So they use pins, and they reconstruct the flow, as you can see, to the best of their ability. But they're not exactly sure, and the critic is very, very tough on the strategies, on the proposer. So the critic asked the proposer to also do a finite element simulation, because solving the inverse problem, they found the Reynolds number, they know the geometry, and then they can do a finite element simulation. So indeed, they find a finite element simulation here to the right, and you can see that now they refine their solution, and they can get much better results. So this is kind of, as I said, it's more interesting to look at the dialogues, which are hilarious. It's like listening to my students collaborating, although they don't overhearing what they're saying, but they don't do it. So it's a lot of fun actually to read through pages. So I'm going to stop here. There's some obvious advantages, of course, using agentic scientific machine learning and so on. And I'll stop here. These are the references. The two references I talked about, these two papers on scientific machine learning agentic, and also Athena, the last part. The Athena is a very, very long paper. We have part of it in the archive that you can see. And there's another paper similar in that spirit for design in general, designing airfoils in this particular case. I will stop sharing here, and so we can have time for questions. And thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you, Prof. Karniadakis, for the amazing talk, and as always, a visionary perspective on the future of AI. So, any questions? So we can have questions, obviously, for both speakers. So we have a joint Q&A. So I maybe start with the...
Hi, Prof. I have one question. Okay, hi, Professor Giorgio. Thanks for sharing the agentic workflow for the machine learning. And I have one question. I say during the choice of the role of the different agents, you choose different LLM. So is there any reasons for different choice of the LLM for different the agent?
Yes, for example, you may want to use Claude 4.6 now. That is because it's better in programming. But so the reason we do that is for diversity that will bring robustness, but also as you probably as a user you can see that none of them is perfect, and then each one emphasizes the different aspects. So we try to leverage those aspects. From ablation studies, you can actually find differences if you replace one with the other. So these are not deterministic answers. In fact, if you run 5 times that question I asked about the Berger's equation, they're always trying to find the exact solution, but the code, if you look at the code they write, is 80% different from one time to the other. So basically, if you think about it, they find different minima. So even with this, you can guess. Now, if you permutate the LLMs and make them play different roles, you will find actually also differences. So that's something that is still under investigation. But so in other words, in that case, you may not need all that, but at this juncture, you need to diversify in terms of LLMs.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's a very amazing work of the Athena, and the design of the workflow is also very reasonable. And I have another question for this research is about recently I see so many studies in AI for science is shifting the trends towards agentic systems, and now I was wondering. For the future research of the AI for science, do you think we should focus more on designing a more powerful, more better agentic workflow to explore the potential of the LLM, or to curate and refine more data to train a domain-specific foundation model?
That's a very good question, but difficult question to answer. So I think you have to stay within a field. Now, the agents here do 2 things, right? One is they choose the architecture for you. They do the tuning, but in addition, they evolve this architecture by trying to improve the solution. And that's very important. As I said, reasoning will be much, much better in the future, so it will be done faster and more accurately. So I believe a year from now, there will be superhuman performance across all fields. In fact, I didn't show you even for DG and spectral element methods, we're doing a Rayleigh-Taylor instability where you have interfaces. And the agent went there, they use new metrics for adaptivity, multiple metrics for adaptivity, and they did an excellent job that typically you wouldn't do it such a refinement with so many different metrics. So that you expect that to see it, but the advantage of the agents at least at this point is that, and you can see that even with OpenClaw. One of my students, my postdocs actually use OpenClaw to drive CFD totally. But so that's the automation part. The interesting part is the reasoning part, right? The intellectual part, how you can be creative and so on. So that is improving. So I cannot give you advice on what to do because I don't know myself. And it's a very difficult task, difficult role to be a prophet. Those people who try to be prophets are doing it because they're trying to drive their stock up in one way or the other. I don't have any stock, so I don't really make prophecies.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Other questions?
Hi, I have a question.
Yes.
So my question is, like Professor Karniadakis mentioned that reasoning with AI will become more and more reliable. So like, how would that happen? Like, how can hallucination of these large language models be stopped? Because if there's like a, if we're trying to do a proof that hasn't been there, even AI doesn't know it, and it doesn't probably have tools. So like how would it, and like a small error can compound um over a chain of reasonings. So like I'm just interested in understanding how hallucination can be stopped, especially if like say Athena in there's a hallucination, something is wrong and we don't know the solution either. How would we be able to check it?
Okay, Aditi, who is asking the question, is my student, so I have a conflict of interest. I'm not going to answer that question. I will ask Disha to answer.
It's difficult to to answer that. Can you maybe elaborate that a little bit, Aditi? So
Sometimes like when you have a conversation, when you're talking about something to like say Claude or Chat GPT, they give you wrong solution. But it's because we already know what the solution would be, so we're able to say whether the solution is wrong or not. And then if you tell, say, Chat GPT that this is wrong, this is how it should be, it would be like, oh yes, you're right, sorry, that was an oversight on my part. But if there's like something, an agentic workflow that's already been constructed and it hallucinates somewhere where probably we don't know
Aditi, because we don't have time, I can tell you quickly what happens. Actually, I was just doing it. There's the new generation, you will see for the same question, they generate many answers. And then you can go through the answers and you can sort of cross-verify something. But there's no, in general, that question cannot be answered. Okay, your question cannot be answered. Clearly, hallucinations are kind of like immature training and so on. But as I said, a year from now, things will be totally different. And the reason we use multi-agents in the first place in Athena or the other framework is to avoid that and the diversification of LLMs. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I have maybe one quick one, Prof. Karniadakis, for you. So in this automated generation, say, of ideas, what are the verifications that we can set? So I think we need somehow to have a sort of a scientific method, automated scientific method for this. Somehow we need to be able to verify the hypothesis that we are creating via potentially agentic ML, and potentially experiments or create some real experiments to verify whether what we are creating is somehow true scientifically. So what would be the things in place to do that sort of scientific method?
It's hard to answer this in general. Maybe if it's in a specific context, I think we can get answers. It is a huge question, right? In general, in our specific domain, I think there are ways to do that. There's theorems. There is scientific computing, other methods that can also check these. Like in the last example, you see the critic did not trust the pin solution, so they decided on their own to go to finite element, which I found that very interesting, actually.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Dixia. So if there are no last questions, okay, I think we can close today's seminar. So thank you everyone for joining us to these two amazing talks.